Chapter 3, we're going to talk about uh, variances. We're going to talk about non-conforming uses of property and things like that too. So I'm going to start on that, but let's see. So I'm going to go towards the bottom of this page where it says the comprehensive municipality plan. I'd like you to highlight, put an X by it. Now it says local governments, municipalities, and counties establish development goals by creating a comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan, also known as the master plan, it's not a regulatory document, but a guide for planning for change. So, on top of the next page, under systematic planning for orderly growth consists of the following elements. You could highlight these next 5 bullets here. First one is land use. What's going to be determined how much of the land's for residential, industrial, agricultural, things like that. The next bullet, housing needs of present and anticipated residents. The next bullet, movement of people and goods, highways, public transportation, parking. Next one is community facilities, schools, libraries, cultural centers, things like that. And the last one is energy conservation. Now, let's talk about zoning. Highlight, put X by these 3 paragraphs under zoning. Zoning is a regulatory tool that helps communities regulate and control how land is used and limits the types of business in a given area. Now, zoning ordinances are local laws that implement the comprehensive plan. So if the comprehensive plan is the big picture, zoning makes up all the details of it. Now, zoning affects matters such as, and they have these bullets here, and you can highlight them. I'll go over these right now. Permitted uses of each parcel of land, lot sizes, types of structures, building heights, setbacks, density, style and appearance, and protection of natural resources. Now, on this next page, let's go on to, says land is divided into zones. They got commercial, residential, agricultural, manufacturing, and business. But there's one more. Actually, it's going to come up in a little bit. Special purpose properties that don't fit into that one. Now, that 2-line paragraph, I'd like you to highlight, put an X by that. A plan unit development is also called a PUD. Now, some communities have a very good plan unit development, and some communities have a horrible plan unit development. And I'm going to give you an example of 2 communities, one good, one bad. I'll give you the bad one first. They both happened the same year. This happened right around 2002, 2003, both of these. The first one, the bad one, was in Algonquin, Lake in the Hills area, right around 2002, 2003. What they did, they had all this, there's still a lot of farmland out there, but they took all this farmland and they opened it up to developers to build homes out there. And that's what they did. There was about 40 different developers. They built tens of thousands of homes out there. I don't know exactly how many. This is in the early 2000s. Now, when they built these homes, a lot of people were buying them because the taxes were low. They're like $2,000 for a nice 4-bedroom, 3-bath home. Well, they built tens of thousands of homes. They increased the population, like more than double the population. Well, guess what they needed now? They needed schools. They needed bigger roads, bigger water lines, sewer lines, things like that. That's what they needed. That's Algonquin, Lake in the Hills. I believe that's McHenry County, if I remember right. So that's what they had to do. Well, guess what happened to those same homes that had taxes of $2,000 a year when people bought them, 2002? What they are right now, today, the same home is $15,000 to $18,000 a year. The state of Illinois worst traffic jam between 3 and 6 in the entire state of Illinois was on Randall Road between, well, Algonquin and Miller or something like that, up in that area. If you got off I-90, you make a right, you go north on Randall Road. Worst traffic jam in the entire state of Illinois between 3 and 6. Parents picking up their kids from school, taking them to soccer, going to McDonald's, going to the to the grocery store to buy dinner for that night or whatever it was. And they, about 10 years ago, they redid all the streets. They just actually repaved them a couple of months ago, but they widened all the streets and everything else, but it was obsolete before it was finished. There's a lot of vacancy of stores. Stores could not stay in business because the traffic jams were just horrible out there. A lot of board ups up there right now still. So up in that Algonquin Lake in the Hills area. That was a bad plan unit development. Now the same year, somewhere around 2002, 2003, Glenview Naval Air Station closed down. They donated 900 acres to the village of Glenview. And actually, I was talking to a member of the planning committee for the village of Glenview. And what happened was I asked her if, because the homes have a lot of value out in Glenview, they have great schools and the location's great. So they have a lot of value. It's not unusual to see over $1 million homes out there. And so I asked her, are you going to build a bunch of homes? He says, well, no, we are going to build some homes. What they also built was 2 shopping centers, one off a lake, one off of Willow. And they built office buildings as well, because the tax basis on a commercial, whether it's office or retail stores, is twice as much as residential. And then if they build less residential, they don't have to provide more money for schools and police and fire and libraries or whatever else services they need to provide. They don't need as much. So Glenview had a good plan unit development, good PUD. Now, there's 4 bullets underneath that next line. Zoning ordinances have traditionally classified land use into residential, commercial, industrial, agricultural, and I told you there's another category. It's called special purpose properties. Special purpose will include, like I said, things like a stadium, a church, a cemetery. So anything that doesn't fit into these other categories is special purpose property. Now, let's skip down to that 4-line paragraph. You can highlight, put an X by it. Some municipalities also use a buffer zone to ease the transition from one use to another. A buffer zone is a piece of land that's used to separate 2 incompatible zoning districts. Let me give you an example. Let me clear this up. Okay. Let's say the village or the city set aside this land over here to be developed. They set up this land right here to be developed. Now, you don't want to have residential properties right next to factories. So they have what's called a buffer zone. Over here, they might set up this area for residential. And over here, they're going to set up this for industrial properties, zoning. In between, they're going to have a buffer zone. A buffer zone is a different zoning classification. You go from residential, maybe to business, then to commercial, and then industrial. You don't want to have factories right next to residential homes. So we have a buffer zone. We have these buffer zones that separate 2 incompatible zoning districts. That's what a buffer zone is. Question here. Is there a minimum space required for this buffer zone? No, it's up to the city planners to decide what it's going to be. You know, parts of the city of Chicago, you got factories and homes right next to each other. So, okay, let me get back to my textbook. Now, let's go on to zoning permits. It's towards the bottom, about the middle of the next page. Zoning permits. To make sure that you're in compliance with the zoning laws, you must get a permit before zoning permit, get the zoning changed so that whatever you're building is allowed to be in there. So zoning permits are required before you get a building permit. Now, skip down 2 paragraphs where it says non-conforming use. Highlight, put an X by that paragraph. Do not forget this non-conforming use. You're definitely going to see this on a state exam, non-conforming use. Now, non-conforming use is this. You own a business, but the zoning law has changed, making that business illegal to operate there. But since you existed before the law was changed, you're not allowed to operate your business because you've been grandfathered in. That's what non-conforming use is. Let me give you an example of non-conforming use. In the city of Chicago, it was about 10, 12 years ago, they passed a law. You cannot have a tavern or a bar in a residential neighborhood. But you go in certain neighborhoods, you drive around Bucktown or Wicker Park, go down Levitt Street. It's a residential street. You got 1, 2, 3 bars on almost every single corner. Occasionally you have one right in the middle of the block. Since they existed for the law before the law was passed, it's unconstitutional to shut them down. They are allowed to continue to operate, and they're allowed to continue to operate based on 3 conditions. If you wanted to remodel your place, you can, as long as you don't add any square footage. If the property's, second thing, if the property's destroyed by fire, more than 50%, you cannot build that tavern up. You can build a house, but not that tavern. And number 3, if you've been shut down for a certain length of time, you're not allowed to reopen. I don't know what the time limit is. So 3 things to continue to operate your business as non-conforming use. Again, you can remodel as long as you don't add any square footage to it. If the property is destroyed by fire, more than 50%, you cannot build a tavern. You can build a house there, or what's a zone for the area. And if you've been shut down for a certain length of time, you won't be allowed to reopen that property up. Non-conforming use. You've been grandfathered in. That's why you're allowed to continue to operate your business there. Non-conforming. So make sure you understand that one. Now, let's talk about conditional use permit. You can highlight, put X by that first paragraph there. Conditional use permit is allowing a business to open up in an area that's not zoned for it. That's conditional use permit. An example, a daycare center, for young children and tots and stuff like that. That's a business and should be located in a business area. But for example, the city of Chicago does allow daycare centers to open up in residential neighborhoods. They're limited how many children, like 4 or 5 children. It's just safer to have a daycare center in a residential neighborhood and more convenient for the parents that live in a neighborhood. So that's called conditional use permit. Now, again, non-conforming means that you own a business, but the law was changed, making that business illegal to operate. But since you existed before the law was passed, you're allowed to continue to operate your business. You've been grandfathered in. Conditional use permit means that you are allowed to open up a business in an area that's not zoned for it. I just gave you that example. I have a question. Here's a good question, Alberto. The question is, can that non-conforming use property be sold? Well, the law said no, but it took lawyers, well, maybe about 30 seconds to get around that. Why? I own a tavern. I want to sell it. They say I can't sell it. So what I do is I incorporate my tavern. Now, a corporation is a legal entity that lives forever. So what I do is I incorporate my tavern and I sell my shares of stock, which means the corporation doesn't change hands, just the stockholders do. That's what lawyers, it took them almost 30 seconds to figure a way around that. So that's how it can be sold. Another question, are you talking about home daycare center, not the same as actual daycare? I thought it was a daycare center. They do allow them to open up where parents will bring their kids to someone's house to watch their children. That's what I'm talking about. like it's an actual business. They still have to be licensed, but they do allow them to open up in a residential neighborhood. Again, they're limited how many children they can have there. So now see this very next paragraph. It's called a variance. I want you to highlight, put X by that. You got a few questions on this. Now, a variance means you exceed the current zoning laws or deviate from the current zoning laws. You need a variance. Let me give you a couple examples of a variance. 1 second. Let's say the city of Chicago passed a law that there could be no building higher than 100 feet high. I want to build a building here that's going to be 150 feet high. All I need to do is get a variance. To exceed the current zoning laws or deviate from the current zoning laws, you need a variance. Variances are not difficult to get, not in the city of Chicago. They're pretty easy to get. All you have to do, you have to go to the alderman's office, buy a couple tables for the fundraisers, and you can get a variance. That's all you need. I've done them. You buy them a few $1,000s, buy a few tickets to the fundraiser. Then what they do is they call you up. Oh, we didn't cancel that fundraiser. We postponed it. Well, we have another one, and we'd like you to buy another couple tables for that one too. See, when Mayor Lightfoot took over the city, she wanted to take that power away from the alderman and bring it to her office. I'm telling you, she would not be in office if she was able to take that away from her. They told her, no, that's the alderman's power. That's how they raise their funds and stuff like that. She's not taking away that power, so, from the alderman. So I know that's exactly how they work. I had an alderman that was a tenant of mine. The ward office was in my building. Brian, you remember when you lived on Western Avenue? I owned a building where the alderman was at, just a couple doors away from you, going towards Winnemac. That was my building. I know about the aldermen and what they do and stuff like that. So let me get back to my textbook. I bought a lot of tables over the years. He didn't live there. He didn't live there. He lived on off of Catalpa, but that was the ward office. It was right there. The ward office was in my building. Now, building codes. Well, the city of Chicago does have you can highlight, put X by building codes and building permits as well. The city of Chicago does have the toughest building codes of any city in this country. The main reason, there's two reasons why we have such tough building codes, and it's because of the Chicago fire is one reason, but the other reason is the trade unions. The unions in the Chicagoland area are very, very strong. You know, if you try to build things in the city and you're not using union workers, you're not getting materials delivered. Something happens to the workers' cars that are non-union, or something happens to the property, burns down or something like that. I remember I was a Teamster truck driver for 15 years, and there was a material yard. 20 truckloads of cement is leaving the yard, and the cement trucks already mixed. Union steward shows up. Where are you going? Where are you going over with those 20 truckloads of cement? We're going to show me your manifest. They show them the manifest. We're going to this address. No, you're not. They're non-union. You're not going there. Turn those trucks around. Dump out the cement. You're not going there. They didn't let them leave. Yeah, it's unions are very, very powerful. I know that. Yeah, the buildings burned down by accident. My ex-father-in-law was the president of the union in 3 states, 3,500 members, graphic arts printing union. I remember when I got married, I had about 50, 60 union presidents at my wedding reception. 50, I had iron workers, I had Teamster presidents, I had printing presidents, I had the president of the electrical union, I had them all there. Well, I tell you, nothing would have happened there, that's for sure. Now, building permits. In order to build something, you must make sure you get a building permit. If you build something without a permit, they make you tear it down. I remember back in 2005, so it's not about 15 years ago, right in Wicker Park, right off of Armitage, and it's near Damon. It wasn't Damon, off of Damon, and I can't think of the name of the street. I don't know if it's Winchester or Honoré, somewhere around there. 2005, guy built he built 4 buildings, each of them 3 stories each. So they had 3 apartments in each one of them. He's almost finished, 90% done. And a building inspector came by. And he stopped and he says, "You know what? These buildings look really, really good." The guy has millions of dollars invested. Building inspector says, "Yeah, you know what? Building looks pretty good. Where's your permit?" Guy says, "I don't have a permit." He says, "Okay, here's what you need to do. You need to go down to City Hall right now. You need to pull a demolition permit. Take these buildings, tear them down to the ground, remove the foundation, and then go get your permits and put them back up." Guy walked away, lost millions of dollars. I don't know why he thought he'd get away with it. You got to pull permits. Now, here's the problem that you as a licensed agent have to be careful. Sometimes people add rooms and they do things and they don't pull the permits on them. And when they don't pull the permits, the new homeowner that you sold the property to could be liable for the fines going back to day one when the addition was put on. So you got to make sure if you list the property and there was any additions done, you better make sure that they have permits before you list that property. That's what you have to watch out for. Now, subdivisions and land developments, you got to highlight that. I want to get to the next page where it says subdivider and developer. You can put X's by both of these. Now, a subdivider is a person that divides up the land into individual home sites, and a developer is the one that puts the improvements, the houses on them. Now, generally, your subdivider and your developer is the same person. They divide up the land and builds the houses, usually the same person. Now, let's go on to, I'm going to skip the rest of this page. Let me go to the next page here where it says private land use controls. I like you to highlight, put an X by the first 3 paragraphs there. It says not all restrictions on the use of land are imposed by the government bodies. Certain restrictions to control and maintain the desirable quality and character of a property or subdivision may be created by private entities, the private owners themselves. Now, these restrictions are separate from and in addition to the land use controls exercised by the government. Next paragraph, C and R's. Covenants, conditions, and restrictions. These are private restrictions by the owner. Any owner can put any restrictions they want on a property. Again, long as it's legal, long as it's non-discriminatory. Question is, what liability does the agent have regarding improper additions without a permit? Well, here's the thing. Agents are responsible for things they didn't know of or things they should have known of. So they're going to have to try to prove that you knew about additions put on without filing permits or anything else like that. It's going to be the proof is on the owner of the property to prove that you knew it. It's kind of difficult to do. But they say agents are responsible for things they did know of or things they should have known of. Now, let's go down to the 5th paragraph down where it says restrictive covenants. Highlight and put an X by that one. Restrictive covenants are considered valid if they are reasonable restraints that benefit all property owners in a subdivision. Restrictive covenants cannot be used for illegal purposes like exclusion of members of certain race, nationalities, or religion. Now, private, highlight put X by this next little 2-line paragraph. Hold on one second. So basically, if the homeowner gets away with it, it's not the agent's problem. That unless the agent actually had knowledge of it, and they're going to have to prove that they had knowledge of it. And the next question, if a permit is not used for repair, is the new owner responsible? The new owner can be responsible and fined. Yes, they can be fined. They can be responsible. And he can try to go back to the previous owner. Good luck doing that. Now, this 2-line paragraph, I want you to highlight, put an X by that. Private land use controls may be more restrictive than the owner's use of local zoning ordinances. The rule is the more restrictive of the two takes precedent. Now, let me draw something out for you, and I want to say something to you, and I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. As far as restrictions are concerned, if the owner is more restrictive than the government, then you got to follow the owner. If the government is more restrictive than the owners, then you got to follow the owners. Now, let me give you an example. This is my lot line over here. I sold this lot to you. Now, let's say the owner has a side yard setback that you cannot build within 10 feet of the side yard. But the government has a 20-foot side yard restriction. Since the government is more restrictive, you have to follow the government. Now, let's say the government, the city says you got to have a 25-foot front yard setback. You cannot build within 25 feet to the sidewalk. But the owner imposes a 40-foot setback that you cannot build within 40 feet. Since the owner is more restrictive, then you have to follow the owner. So I'm going to say something to you. I hope you understand what I'm saying. I don't know how else to say this. As far as restrictions are concerned, whichever restriction is more restrictive, that's the restriction you follow. If the government's more restrictive than the owner, you follow the government. If the owner is more restrictive than the government, you follow the owners. Whichever restriction is more restrictive, that's the restriction that you follow. Okay, someone asked me in general, what kind of additions need a permit? Usually anything that involves anything with structure. Now, one way of finding out, you get a licensed general contractor who pulls the proper permits if needed, a licensed general contractor. There's a lot of good general contractors out there, licensed general contractors. They know what they need to pull a permit on. Now, but there's also what we call in a business, there's a lot of guys, we call them Chuck with a truck. And here's a guy who went to sleep last night, and he's not a contractor, but he woke up this morning and he is a contractor. He has a credit card for a couple $100 and buy some new tools at Home Depot, and today he's a contractor. Not last night, but today he is. He has a van, and now he's a contractor. I told you I had a construction company for about 10 years. Very good. We did a lot of insurance claims, but roofing, siding, windows mostly. I did additions. I had a whole second floor addition, things like that as well. Like if we would change a roof, to change a roof, you don't need a permit, but you have to go through what's called the sheeting the plywood sheeting, if I had to change that, I would need to pull a permit. You have to pull a permit for the dumpster to haul the stuff away. Unless it's totally on private property, but if you left it on the street, I needed a permit for that too. So the general contractor would know what they need to pull a permit for. If you hire a licensed general contractor. Now, this last paragraph of this page, Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act. I want you to highlight, I want you to put an X by this one. And, because this is definitely going to be on every state exam. After that set of bullets on this next page, write a rescission. I want you to highlight, put an X by that one. And then the next paragraph where it says if the purchaser or lessee, highlight, put an X by that one. I'm going to explain all these to you in one moment. And then, I believe it's the last two paragraphs. Yes, the last two paragraphs, highlight, put an X by that as well. Now, I'm going to write something very important for you to know. Very important for you to know. Guarantee this is going to be on the state exam. Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act. Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act. Now, this is what the act states. If a buyer of vacant land located out of their own state the buyer must receive a property report at the signing of the contract. If the owner, if the buyer, I should say, if the buyer receives the property report at the signing of the contract, the buyer has 7 days to cancel the contract. Now, If the buyer, boy, this is a lot of writing. Doesn't receive the property report at the signing of the contract, the buyer has 2 years to cancel the contract, get all their money back. Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act. This is a federal law that states that anyone buys a vacant property located out of their own state, not in your state, located outside of your state, you must get a property report at the signing of the contract. Now, if they do give you the property report at the signing of the contract, you have 7 days to cancel the contract, get your money back. If they don't give you the property report at the signing of the contract, you have 2 years to cancel the contract and get your money back. Now, remember, this is only if you buy vacant land located outside of your own state. This doesn't apply vacant land in your state. This doesn't apply to a house. In your state, out of your state, this has nothing to do with it. Only vacant land. And the reason they did this, and I'm going to tell you what's going to be on the property report. The reason they did this is that a lot of people from the state of Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, they lost a lot of money. Over 50,000 people lost a lot of money buying vacant land in Florida that turned out to be nothing but a swamp. Can't build anything there, nothing there but, I don't know, snakes and alligators. I don't know what was out there. Here's what would happen. A commercial will come up on TV, and this will happen like in mid-February, for example. Now, you know what? Super Bowl's over, the holiday's over. As people get older, it seems like the winter takes forever to get done. So they're sitting in the houses mid-February. They can't wait for the spring. They've got cabin fever. And here comes a commercial. Here we are in Florida. We're in mid-February, and it's 75 degrees outside. And they show people boating and golfing and jet skiing and swimming, fishing, whatever else they're doing. And it says you can own some land here. We'll sell you a half acre of land. You give us $5,000 down, $500 a month, and in 10 years you'll own this half acre of land. Well, over 50,000 people wound up buying this land, and it's located in the middle of a swamp. So now the law says if anyone buys vacant land located outside of their own state, they must get this property report. Now, again, if they get the property report, they still have 7 days to cancel and get their money back if they get the property report at the signing, get all their money back. But if they don't get the property report, they have 2 years to cancel the contract and get their money back. What's going to be on the property report? Well, they're going to tell you what the zoning is, what you're allowed to build on it, what the city allowed to be zoned on there, to be built. If there's any liens on the property, if there's any type of restrictions on the property, what you're allowed to build on the property. And then they have something, and the only place you're going to see this, what I'm going to be talking about, is on a state exam. Otherwise, you're never going to probably see this or use this. There's something called a percolation test. Percolation test. Now, in the city of Chicago, most of our suburbs, we have sewer lines. Every time you flush your toilet, you wash your clothes, all that wastewater goes to the sewer lines, and then I don't even know where it goes. It gets treated. I know it gets treated someplace. I think that, honestly, I'm not sure, but I think it goes down the channel to the Illinois River down to Mississippi, and it goes to that's where it goes down to the Mississippi, I believe. Now, in some far out suburbs and in the country, they don't have public sewer systems. Instead of public sewer systems, they have something called a septic tank. Now, I didn't know what a septic tank was. I had to look it up. Now, when you don't have public sewer system, what you have buried in your backyard, you can't see it because it's buried there, is called a septic tank. What a septic tank is, it's a big concrete box. I believe it's made out of concrete. It's about, I don't know what size, maybe around 12 feet by 12 feet and maybe 3-4 feet deep. And they bury this concrete box in your yard. And every time you flush your toilet, you wash your clothes, all this wastewater goes into that septic tank. Now, coming out of the septic tank, they have these pipes, drainage pipes. You can't see them because everything's underground. Now, the thing is, they have to do a percolation test. Where are they going to locate the septic tank? Why? Because the water that drains out of the pipes, the wastewater, cannot drain too fast or too slow because it's not good for the environment. So that's why they have to do a percolation test. Now, this is what I've seen several times on the state exam. You do not need a percolation test if you have public sewer systems. That's what I want you to know. Do not need a percolation test in the city of Chicago. Why? Because we have public sewer system, or anywhere else they have public sewers. And you know what? I just thought of another state exam question and where I left off, and I don't know why I forgot this. Remember, I was talking about a license on Monday. A license is a privilege to use someone else's property. Well, here's a question I've seen several times on a state exam. A neighbor asked me to allow him to store his bulldozer on my land. Question is, what is that an example of? That is a license. That's called a license. They use that term. A neighbor asked to store his bulldozer on my property. What did I do? I granted them a license. And I think that's the end of chapter 3.